Welcome to This Week in Habsland. I am Jordan, and I'm joined by my co-host Brian. We are here each Monday to discuss all things Montreal Canadiens. You can find us on social media on Blue Sky and TikTok at HabslandPod. Now, Brian, we are at the one quarter point of the NHL season. The Habs have played 20 games, so we're basically there for them as well. And we are going to spend this episode zooming out much further than we typically do. We've been trying to stay game to game for the first 6 weeks or so of the season, but we're going to take a step back and look at the team as a whole. But before we get into that, we're bringing back our 3 stars. We're going to ask them a few burning questions. Like last week, I want to maybe spend 1 or 2 minutes at the beginning giving a bit of appreciation to Pierre Rudd, who also got inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame, much like Shea Weber, so we're just doing this a week later. He had a really nice speech. I like how he thanked the players on Monday before the game against Edmonton. It really got the crowd energized. And Pierre Rudd is the voice of the Montreal Canadiens. The Habs are in a really awesome position where they have 4, 5, 6 different voices in theory between John Bartlett and Brian Mudryk and the guys on TVA Sport, the guys on TSN 690. Like, it goes on and on and on. And then Sportsnet moves guys around. We unfortunately get Gary Galley half the time. So tons of people, you could in theory say, oh, that's the voice of the Montreal Canadiens. But if we're being honest, especially for our lifetime, it's Monsieur Pierre Rudd. He is the guy. And he just, like, congrats to him, I guess, first and foremost. Like, he's absolutely deserved it. He's a stand-up guy. Any thoughts on Pierre Rudd?
Only a giant package of positive thoughts on Pierre Rudd. Absolutely the voice of the Canadiens, Jordan. I was talking to this about this to a friend of mine recently about how, because he doesn't speak French, and I was telling him the reasons to speak French, and one of the things that popped into my head is being a Montrealer and being able to watch the games in French and understand what's going on, and most importantly, listen to Pierre Rudd call the games and call "et le but" and call "raté de justesse" and all those incredible little catchphrases that he has had over the years. He's been consistently, like you were saying, there's other voices of the Canadiens too in English, but he's consistently the most knowledgeable, the most expressive, the most excited, and the most, I would say, in line with most fans' appreciation of the team. Like, wherever the team is at, he seems to have a very good handle on how people feel about it and how the players feel about it and the direction of the team. And just an unbelievable announcer, an unbelievable person, and thrilled that he's in the Hall as well now.
Yeah, and so many catchphrases, intentionally or not. I mean, "et le but" is like it's the titular one. It's the big one. A couple others that are my personal favorites, and it's when he's kind of flummoxed by a situation,
right?
And so I absolutely love it when there's something weird happens and he doesn't totally understand it or know even how to explain it, and he's like, "Hey, man." Like, it's whatever it is. Yeah. This is what happened. Yeah. And of course the other one is like "ma parole," like when he's just like, wow, what's going on here? I love how he has those moments where, like, he's still being a professional, but he's just letting, like, just dropping it for a moment, being like, I'm also watching whatever the hell, usually it's the referees, are doing, and saying, like, I also don't understand what's going on. Whatever, let's keep having fun.
I'm a fan too, and this is also confusing to me.
Yes.
He's coming to it, or coming at it from our perspective a lot of the time. Yeah,
so awesome for Pierre Rudd. Congratulations again. And I will just, like, last little point, as someone who's, like, moved away from Quebec, I still watch as many RDS. I know I make it a point to watch different broadcasts, but RDS is still the one that I watch by far and away the most. It's 60% of the games I will watch is going to be on RDS. It's because of Pierre Rudd, and he's top tier. He's number one. Okay, so quarter point. Let's get into it. There was a Vegas game on Saturday night.
Yeah, don't you wish we recorded on, like, Wednesday, Jordan?
Yeah, I do. You know what? That Vegas game, it is not an encapsulation of the entire part of the first quarter of the season. It's part of it, though, of the inconsistent play of, you're in a close game and suddenly you're not, and then just line jumbling in the third period. So we can talk about Vegas if you want, but I do think it's not something we haven't seen before in other games this season. So it's not like it was a completely new data point. So we're bringing back 3 stars. It's not the 3 stars of the week, but it's the 3 stars of the first quarter of the season. Before we get into that, Brian, maybe just a brief overall thoughts on the start of the season. I know you're very excited to bring back a segment that you did a few times last year about Martin St. Louis' series ideology. I know you've done work on it. Maybe re-explain it to the listener quickly,
Sure.
and then how have the Habs done?
Yeah, so this is a Martin St. Louis philosophy that revolves around breaking up the regular season into pseudo playoff series. So best of 7 series throughout the regular season. And therefore, if you've lost a few games and you're, whatever, let's say you're 1-3 and you're past 4, it gives you a little bit extra motivation to win the next 3 games to win that fake series. Let's say I think he mentioned it pretty much at the beginning of his tenure here, like right when he started.
Yeah, I think part of it too, it is to add the motivation. I think really, especially with a losing team, it's to say like, okay, that series is over. Forget it. We lost 4 of the last 5. New series, like clean slate. Don't hold it. I think it's partially that, like have the goldfish mentality.
Yep.
So I think it's double edged in a good way in that way.
Spot on, and that's exactly what happened after the 3rd series of the year. We're in the 4th now. Anybody want to venture a guess how many we won of the first 3? Yeah, we lost in 6, lost in 6, lost in 5. But on that goldfish idea, that very Ted Lasso goldfish idea of forgetting the negative and just moving on, after that loss in 5 series, the 3rd fake series, they win their next 2 games. And the second one against Edmonton was probably the best game of the year. It would have competed with some of the best games that they played at the end of last year when they started looking like a team that, oh man, okay, we're starting to see something here. We're starting to see identity here. So that identity definitely came back in that 3-0 win against Edmonton. Huge game. Gouli was great against McDavid. So was Evans. Nick Suzuki was good. Like that was a really important game for this team. And it was to go up 2-0 in this most recent series. After the Vegas game, we're now at 2-1. So now the point is sort of look ahead to the next 3-4 games and see if you can get 2 more victories before you've lost 3. And I think for where the team is at in the standings right now, literally bottom of the league, like bottom 3, I think in points percentage, they're 3rd last or 4th last. Now it's much more of okay, we're not going to be competing for playoffs, so let's find some excitement elsewhere. Let's find reasons to play elsewhere, and this series thing is one of those. I do want to talk about I know I said don't you wish we started recording on Wednesday, but there are things to be learned from this collapse in Montreal against Vegas. First of all, that game highlighted the violent swings that we see from this team, going from their best game of the year to one of their worst, where even their top players sort of didn't look that animated, didn't look that ready. And these violent swings also extend period to period, because the first period, it was 0-0 at the end. Second period comes, and there's a hurricane. There's just a tidal wave of goals that go in for the Knights, and it's 5-0 going into the third. So it just highlights this problem that the Montreal Canadiens have had, especially in the second period, and you've highlighted that a bunch. So if you want to jump into that after, we can talk for a couple minutes about that, why that is, the long change or what. But it just highlights that period to period, this team is very inconsistent. And for a rebuilding team, yeah, that's okay, but we were hoping to take a larger step forward and be able to discuss close games rather than blowouts. Like I really thought going into this season that we were done with the recurring blowouts. And it's becoming apparent that A, we're not done with that, and that B, the inconsistency is going to be there probably for a little while, because this isn't a problem that's going to fix itself. We're going to get into Laine coming back later, which is great news, and that might help a bit, but just him coming back isn't going to take blowouts and turn them into victories or close games.
Right. So I guess quickly on the second period thing, I've been thinking about this more and more. It can't just be the long change, because I mean, you saw it a little bit on Monday where the Habs actually got better in the second period, and then the third period might have been their best period of the entire season.
Yeah.
But what we've seen much more frequently is an okay first period and then a throttling in the second. And to me, that speaks to team adjustments. It's not necessarily a long change. It's more the other team played the Habs for 20 minutes, got back to the dressing room and said, okay, we're changing X, Y, and Z. Let's go out there and kill them. And that's what happens. You can go to the Rangers game, the Vegas game. They won this one, but the Leafs game in the second period, the Minnesota game they recently lost, still played well in some of those games. But the second period comes and the team they either continue to turn the pressure up. Like that could be the other part too, where the Habs just like they're holding the fort, and eventually House of Cards falls.
Yeah. They start strong and they've plateaued at the start, because that's as high as they can possibly go, and the other team is still ramping up. That's right. That's possible too.
And the other bit I wanted to talk about regarding expectations and how we're perceiving success this season. I think these past 2 seasons, like if when we're looking at a team, we're evaluating between player development / success and team development / success. So player and team. Like, I think these past 2 seasons, it's been like 90-10 player versus team. We want to see Caulfield develop. We want to see Slav develop, Gooley, Suzuki, on and on and on. Team success, honestly, minimal. Not zero, but minimal. I think what happened this year, coming into this year, is that like that line started to move to maybe like a 75, 25, 70, 30, or it's still mostly player development. But hey, we want to start seeing some team success.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it too, because at the end of the day, like maybe they don't get to 82, 83 points like we thought they would. 74, 78, like I totally still see that as a legitimate possibility. But again, part of the reason it feels like it's been a disappointment so far is because we're trying to now see team success. And we are evaluating them a bit more as a team. And in that aspect, that's been more disappointing because we can point to Caden Gooley, we can point to Lane Hudson and Nick Suzuki, and at times in the last few games, Arbor Jacki, and be like, oh, there's progression there. Emil Heineman's a fantastic example of that too.
Yeah.
But from a team perspective, we're watching them and we're being like, the first 10 games, honestly, a fairly bad disaster. They started figuring out something with the defense in these last 10, but it's still like, how much do you have to focus on defense to where your offense falls apart? There's also just lack of consistency, lack of effort, on and on and on. So from a team perspective, it's been disappointing. From a player perspective, there's 2 guys, Doc and Slav, that have been disappointing thoroughly. But beyond that, I think the players have mostly been all right. It's weird. Like, and I'm going to get into this with Suzuki, but like when we get to 3 stars, but like Keely's having a good season. His lines have not had good season. And that's the dichotomy that we've been dealing with.
And I wonder too if maybe we put the cart before the horse by going directly from player development to team. Maybe it should have been trios and pairings, because there's also a lack of consistency when you look at the chemistry between these guys, because they're not playing together for more than a few games because they have a rough one and then Marty shakes things up. I mean, against Vegas, complete blender. Yeah. You know, Slav and Doc both moved down all the way to the bottom to go play with Kendata for only a few minutes. That's also a say on Kendata to say, like, you know, you've been playing well, go play with these big boys, even though they're not performing well. But Kendata's been good since he's been here. Like, definitely superseded my expectations. I think yours too, most fans.
Yeah. That's mostly, though, St. Louis just being annoyed with Slav and Doc.
For sure.
And just saying, get out of here. Heineman and Armia deserve Suzuki's time more than you do.
But it's not the only time it's happened either. Yeah. It's happened quite a bit. So every time that happens, that speaks to, well, we can't start talking about the team's ability to perform as a unit with a specific identity if the lines themselves are all getting jumbled, because your identity is so heavily based on, well, what does the first line do? Okay, they're a scoring line. What does the second line do? Oh, they're more defensive now because Evans is there. He wasn't there at the start.
Right.
Now he is. So the whole sort of framework of how this team even operates is ever changing. So at a certain point, I think it's going to be very, very nice when Laine comes back. Maybe RHP gets in, and hopefully, I'm crossing my fingers that within the next 20 games, like maybe that's the point today, is to say that in the next 20 games before the halfway mark, we start to see some permanent fixtures in terms of the lineup. Maybe we see a line in the top 6 that remains that way for the next 20 games, or at least 15 of 20, something like that.
Right.
That would be a breath of fresh air for me. And then that extends to the defensive pairings too. I mean, Matheson with Hudson. Oh, no, wait. Gooley with Hudson, or Gooley with Matheson. Like, even just between those 3 guys, they're getting shuffled around like crazy. The 5th and 6th defenseman and the 7th, that's sort of game to game. They seem, which actually, as we're on that topic, they seem to have just sort of removed Barron almost entirely. Like, he really hasn't gotten into that many games lately. And that's great for Jacki and Struble. Jackie's looked better. Struble's looked okay. I do wonder about Barron's development.
Yeah, and we can get into the more specifics of the defense a little bit later on. But on the point of, like, there's certainly been a lack of team chemistry.
Yeah.
This year. Whether or not you have to base that on specific line combinations, I'm not so sure, because this is the NHL. Like, teams will never be the same. Lines will always be moving around. But I understand, it's just, there has been a lack of chemistry. Yeah. Period. Like, that's one of the biggest issues we've seen with the team. Before we get into the 3 stars, we'll make it more positive. But let's bring us down for one more moment.
Okay.
I just wanted to present some team stats.
Sure.
Let's all encompass here. I tried to pick up some of the more important ones. So I had 5-on-5, shot share and expected goal percentage. So 28th and 29th in the NHL. Now, that is up, believe it or not.
Wow.
They were both 30.
Good for them.
They were 31st and 32nd about 3 weeks ago, which
Okay.
means on average, the second batch of 10 games 11 to 20, closer to middle of the pack. But
Okay.
projecting as a bottom 5 team, I would expect that number to continue to go up, but we're not talking more than like 23rd or 24th, probably. So that's 5-on-5. How are they dealing as a team? Let's go to goaltending. 5-on-5 save percentage, dead last.
Yeah, not surprising.
And like I have a tough time there being like, okay, how much is that is on the goaltending and how much of that is on the team defense? Now, the fact that expected goal percentage and shot attempt percentage is also towards the bottom makes me like a little bit less punitive towards the goaltenders in this situation. But you cannot tell me that Caden Primo's had a brutal season so far. Monty's been very up and down. Another stat I looked at for goaltending, number of quality starts, which is the hockey reference number. Montreal Canadiens are tied for 20th among quality starts for goaltenders. So that talks to consistency. The goaltending has not been overly consistent. It's bottom of the lower end. And then goals against above expected, they're 30th.
Okay.
Which that kind of balances out like how much of are you putting on the team.
Yeah.
So goaltending has been poor. Like there's no other way to look at it.
No question.
Last one, special teams. This is in the bright spot.
Yep.
So I used my version of these stats, not power play percentage or penalty kill. So just for simplicity, all I'm doing is taking into account essentially the number of power play opportunities you get and how many shorthanded goals you give up. So I call them adjusted power play, adjusted penalty kill. They're 10th in power play and they are 16th in penalty kill. So the penalty kill is the big one that drops because penalty kill percentage, I believe, is 8th in the NHL. But they take too many damn penalties, and they've really not had much success on the shorthanded goals.
No.
So far this
true.
season. Adjusted special teams, that's when you blend it all together. They are plus 0.1, meaning for every game, the Habs will average out plus 0.1 goals among the power play and the penalty kill.
Okay.
So I mean, a good example of this is first in the NHL is, I think there's New Jersey and Winnipeg are right at the top of the NHL. Winnipeg's adjusted power play is 0.95.
Wow.
Basically meaning
Nearly
for every
a goal.
game,
Wow.
they are scoring a power play goal. So overall, special teams is 11th. So we're seeing from a possession standpoint at 5-on-5, bottom 5 in the NHL, but expecting it, but trending up. Goaltending, bottom 5, I don't see any hope, really. Special teams, 11th, so above average. And it seems all right so far.
So is that just the Lane Hudson and Jake Evans effect? Like
That's the question.
Not to funnel it down to two specific guys, but they've both had a big hand in improving the special teams. Wow. So I was expecting the numbers to be bad. I was going to say not that bad, but yeah, that matches the eye test, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty spot on with the eye test. The special teams have definitely been the bright spot, and everything else has been pretty rough. And on the quality starts, Primo's had 1 quality start. Monty's had 9. So Monty's also started way more games than Primo because I think it became clear early on, like Monty's ready, Primo's not. At the end of last season, we thought Primo was. I guess he's not, or he's having a rough spell and they're trying to give Monty more starts. I don't know what it is, but 1 quality start from your backup is not great. 9 from your starter, that's okay, but definitely needs to be better. And then what we've seen a lot of, which I've mentioned before, is when a game is going the wrong way. Like we were watching the Vegas game and, I'm usually an optimist, but pessimist that I was when we were watching that, after the second goal went in, I said, game over.
Yeah.
And I don't want to feel that way, but the Montreal Canadiens have not come back from a deficit, giving up the first goal. They haven't won a single game yet this year. I think there have been 10, 11, 12, maybe 19 games that they've given up the first goal.
I believe it's 0-9-2 now.
0-9-2. Okay. So 11 games they've given up the first goal. They haven't won a single one. They've only gotten to overtime or shootout twice in those games. And then when the second one went in, very quickly after, it just looked like the floodgates were opening. Vegas has found the weak point. Again, to your point of going to the dressing room between periods and saying, okay, this is what we can exploit with this team. And then they just fired away and scored basically everything they put on net for a good 10 minutes. So
that's the team.
That's the team.
That's been the team through 20 games. Small trends upwards at 5-on-5, solid special teams, really rough goaltending. And that leads to a team that's going to be bottom 10 in the NHL. That's what it is.
And another crucial point here is that one thing that determines how good you're going to be at 5-on-5 is the quality of your centers. and we have a very good center in Nick Suzuki. We have a very good third or fourth center in Jake Evans, who's now playing second line minutes. Remind you of anybody? Philip Danault, maybe, from back in the day, playing first line minutes?
Yeah, I may have called while we were watching the game last night, I may have called Jake Evans discount Danault.
Yeah.
And I stand by it.
Yeah, pretty close, I would say. He's brilliant defensively, but doesn't deserve second line minutes. Doc hasn't deserved it. Newhook hasn't deserved it. Dvorak should be in the A. So there's really nobody. And Condotta, you're not going to give Condotta second line minutes.
No.
Like, who takes on that responsibility? That's a crucial thing, I think, to be watching. So, and I think we'll get into that later, definitely. So why don't we put that on the back burner? Do you have anything else on the team globally before we get into some positivity here?
No, that's
with the
enough.
Stars?
It's enough doom and gloom. Like, the Canadians are 7-11-2, and ultimately, at the end of the day, 16 points in 20 games. You would have preferred it to be better, especially considering strength of schedule, but it is what it is. Let's get positive. Let's go 3 stars, bringing it back. Let's be happy for the next 10, 15 minutes, however many minutes we spend on this. Brian, I think we spoke about this a week ago offline, 5 players with legitimate consideration for the 3 stars. I think I could probably be talked into one other guy being allowed to be in the conversation, but ultimately 5-6 guys. I ended up making my cuts. I have my 3 stars. So if I can kick us off, and I don't feel great about it because I've said it multiple times. I've levied, I think, legitimate criticism towards him, but I do think Nick Suzuki has been the best player on the Montreal Canadiens. He is by far and away the most consistent player. Again, from an individual standpoint, he's still on the penalty kill, not as much, but he's still doing penalty kill stuff. The power play one is working for whatever reasons, but he is a part of that solution. He is still scoring goals. He is providing assists. Until it was broken up on Saturday night, the line with Slav and Doc was, from a statistical standpoint, working quite well. So again, I've made my criticisms at Suzuki. I think at the end of the day, when I was looking at him, or, we all know who the other candidates are, but I don't want to spoil who might be your first star. My deciding factor was Cole Caulfield, who is one of the players to consider. He has looked best when Nick Suzuki has been a center. Of
course.
Juraj Slafkovsky has looked best when
Nick Suzuki's a center. Yep.
Kirby Doc has been like, and that to me, I was like, okay, and again, none of those particular trio combos, I think all versions of it have been together at this point, have worked excellently. But the best success those guys have had, like Slav and Doc, were playing better these last few games until Vegas, but everything got blown up in Vegas. Caulfield was on fire to start the season. Suzuki was a center. Yeah. That was my tiebreaker. Even though, like, eye test wise, there's still something missing, but I think that's like the lines aren't working perfectly. So Nick Suzuki is my first star, bordering on point per game again. Was he part of your 3 stars? Was he first? Where was he for you?
So I'm going in a slightly different direction here. You're going with the most valuable players to the team to start the year. And we got told by a very good friend of the show, that it's nice when we disagree. So I want to go in a little bit different direction and base myself on expectations and results.
Dvorak?
Christian Dvorak, first star.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. What, 5 more months, and he's off the team?
Yeah.
Or maybe 2 weeks. Maybe 2 weeks when the other guys come back, he gets waived. We'll see. Okay. Enough doom and gloom, Jordan. Don't mention Dvorak's name. Yeah, Nick Suzuki, he's been awesome. Better in the face-off circle. He was okay to start the year, and he's bridging that gap between what he was at and 50%. He's close to 49 right now. That's great. He's blocking shots. He's implicated in all zones. So responsible defensively, that's what you want from Nick Suzuki. You want him to be creative offensively. His basically points per game shows that, and the fact that it's pretty nicely distributed between power play and 5-on-5. 5-on-5 accounts for about 2/3 of his points, which is a very positive thing. Like, he's not just a power play merchant. He's also contributing at 5-on-5. And your point of whatever player gets put with him plays better is an incredibly important one, I think. To have somebody like that in your organization at Nick Suzuki's age, who's so good in all zones. I meant to mention the really, really smart and calculated and calm in transition too, because I mentioned the defense, the offense. In transition, he's been brilliant. But to have a guy like that, so young, but already be the crux of what is, like, you just point to that and say, oh, who's playing with Suzuki? Oh, they're going to have a good game.
Yeah.
Man, what a crucial factor in a team's development. So I completely agree with you if you're basing it on the best player for the Montreal Canadiens, the most consistent player, and the player who's been the most important in terms of winning games. Basing it on expectations and results, did you expect anything different from Nick Suzuki?
No, I think he's been maybe when you add in the factor of it's been a bit more tumultuous of a start of a season, we haven't talked about this, but St. Louis teams, this is the third year he's like proper coach. The first 2 years, they got off to much better starts. This year, it's been much more tumultuous.
Yeah.
But Suzuki is unfazed by that. So that, if anything, like that's almost better than that. Not, again, that's, I don't know if that's expectations, but that's like putting in some like environmental conditions. So like, but that part is different.
Right.
But I have a feeling, I know who you're leading up to. If you can just get to who you actually put as your first star.
So to answer my own question, yeah, Nick Suzuki, he's basically met maybe a little bit better than expectations. You know who has leapt over expectations? Brendan Gallagher.
Of course.
Brendan Gallagher has absolutely leapt over expectations. He's going to be my first star.
Good.
So there's many elements to this. There's obviously the fact that he has altered his game. We were talking about this yesterday as we were watching the game, about how back in the day, Brendan Gallagher would go to the net and I said, if they tracked cross checks received per 60, Brendan Gallagher would be at the top of the NHL. He'd be like top 3 every single year. Mm-hmm. But he's doing different things now. He's finding the quiet areas. He's able to find the gaps in coverage where he can be alone and receive a pass, dust it off, and take a wicked shot, rather than needing to get it off his stick immediately because there's someone right next to him in the slot, or B, just get cross-checked before the puck even gets to him, and the ref just basically puts blinders on and doesn't see it because it's Brendan Gallagher. So this alteration of his game, which absolutely is helped by Martin St. Louis because of his off-puck philosophy that you only have the puck about 5% of the time on average if you're a skater. So that 95% of the time that you're on the ice off the puck, you have to be in the right position. Gally has absolutely improved that. And also in an interview this week, Martin St. Louis was talking about how Gally's brain just keeps improving. Your body, as time goes on in hockey, sadly, careers end. We just watched the Joe Thornton ceremony, for the Sharks, and a brilliant playmaker. We were talking about him as like one of the top 5 playmakers of all time. Unbelievable player. If his body kept up with his mind, he'd still be playing. He'd still be top in the league. Mm-hmm. Like no question about that. But bodies break down. And so in the case of Gallagher, his brain continues to improve and make up for the fact that his body, A, is just getting flat out getting older, but has been beaten down by 6'5" defensemen every single night for his whole career. So on that front, the way that he's altered his game is really impressive. I'll get into the nitty-gritty of his stats here. Brendan Gallagher so far, 8 goals on the season. He's the only guy who's beating him is Cole Caulfield. 4 assists to go along with that. He's done a bunch on the power play too, so 3 of his goals have come on the power play. His connection with Hudson is very apparent. And in a lot of times when this team has been bad and looking like they just can't find their game, who's the guy shouting at them on the bench to figure it out? It's Brendan Gallagher. He's been the leader of this club, one of the leaders. Nick Suzuki's another one. So I think for both of our first stars to be 2 of the most important leaders on this team, one of them very outspoken in Brendan Gallagher and one of them a more lead by example guy in Nick Suzuki, I think I'm pretty happy with these 2 picks, Jordan. I think they deserve to be there. Yeah,
so Gallagher's my third star. It's his give a bleep meter has been off the charts to start the season, especially how rough it's been. He has understood the moment and understood the A on his sweater and the importance that carries. And he's also been leading by, he's given it to them on the bench. I'm sure he gives it to them in the dressing room as well. But he's also leading by example. If you look at Gallagher's scoring chart, in his 8 goals, 1 is in the crease, 7 is in that zone immediately outside of the crease.
Yeah.
So he's figured out how to play differently by like 3 feet.
Yeah.
But it makes such a huge difference because I think, like, knock on all the wood, but like his durability is going to get better and that's going to let him to play more and more. Also, I notice this a lot in the Vegas game, but like other games too, his hand-eye coordination,
it's sick.
It's the tops on the team.
Yeah.
By far and away. He is deflecting stuff all the time. And he it's a very legitimate skill. He's the best on the team at it. He is always deflecting pucks mid-air towards the net.
Well, I have an answer to why that is. He trained under Subban's slap shot and then under Weber's slap shot.
And Weber's the one that taught him.
He broke his freaking wrist with a blast. So he had to get good pretty quick at figuring out where that puck's going to be. And so now when it's a Lane Hudson wrister or a Matheson wrister, those are a little easier to get your stick on. So he went into the hyperbolic time chamber with Weber for a while, basically.
But that's the thing. So Yeah, Galley leading by example. First start for you, third start for me. I'll get into my second start. The only guy I still have. It had to be Cole Caulfield. Has spent most of the season towards the top of the NHL in goals. 12 goals really kept the team afloat in those first 8 to 10 games. Like those dark times. Like he's cooled off certainly. I think it's only 2 goals in the last 8 or 9 games, but it's those first 10 to 12 games where, like we've said, like it's the first 10 were absolutely awful. The most recent 10 have been still bad, but like starting to trend upwards. During that awful stretch, Caulfield, along with a couple heroic Montembeault performances, were the reason they were getting any points.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, the production has slowed down with Evans, and, you know, it is what it is. But, like, I also find it's kind of funny. I was looking at, like, tons of obscure stats. Did you know Cole Caulfield has double the amount of hits that Christian Dvorak has? I'm so sorry we keep bringing up Dvorak. But
that fits the eye test.
But it's because I looked at it because I wanted to bring up the play he made on Monday where it was against Draisaitl?
It was against Draisaitl.
Where he bumps Draisaitl off the puck.
Well, but let's be fair, Jordan. Is Draisaitl a strong dude? I mean,
I think he could bench press us together at the same time.
Easily.
So yes.
So
that was the point of it.
5'7" Cole Caulfield knocks renowned elite power forward Leon Draisaitl off the puck.
Yeah, top 5 to 7 player in the world.
Yeah,
knocks him off the puck. Then a little give and go, get the Evans off to the Kaden Gooley goal.
Amazing.
That's where I wanted to go with that. Like he's using his physicality again, like another diminutive stature player on this team that is not afraid to use his body. Just because you're small doesn't mean you can't be physical. You have to be smart. You have to not engage too much so you don't get clobbered. Yeah. It doesn't mean you can't dictate physicality every now and then. We saw Caulfield do it a little bit last year, and we're starting to see it happen again and again. So there's signs of like positivity and growth in it. So Caulfield was my number 2. Yeah, the march towards 40 goals continues.
That's an excellent pick, Jordan. He's certainly on pace for that. And on the topic of that physicality, his express purpose every single time he goes into a battle is to come out of the battle with the puck or his teammate to have the puck. And so every time he lays the body or uses his body in any type of way, it's always for that purpose. And fairly successful for his size at it. I would say very successful for his size at doing just that. The other guy who's doing just that, to jump to my second star, Lane Hutson. Mm-hmm. Again, expectations, results, are you kidding me? Now, this is the expectations, I think, of media members, our fan base, other fan bases, everybody who watches hockey basically thought, yeah, Lane Hutson's going to be a third pairing guy who's going to be a power play merchant and who will not be implicated defensively, get burned defensively all the time, be incapable to find positioning. Like, all of these things were being said to start the year.
You can even go further steps back. You could go to September where we're like, oh, he's going to be really insulated and be playing 16 minutes a game.
Exactly.
Or you can go back to the summer where it's like, oh, he's going to play top pairing in Laval.
Yeah.
Like, we can keep going back multiple months to say how limiting we're like, okay, but like, we got to make sure he's just doing this.
Yeah.
But instead,
he's had a meteoric exponential rise to being one of the most used defensemen on this team.
I'm fairly confident he's number 1 in NHL rookies and among ice time. He's around 23 minutes a night.
Rookies, definitely. I'm just wondering on the Canadiens. Mike Matheson's at 24 minutes. And Lane Hutson's just under 23.
Yeah.
So it's Matheson and then Hutson a minute less, let's say. A lot of that is penalty kill because, as you said earlier, the Habs take a lot of crappy penalties, unfortunately. Yeah. But back to Hutson. Yes, the physicality. He's implicated. He's getting down. He's blocking shots. He's had to be on the penalty kill now and then, not often. On the power play, he's been awesome. He and Gallagher, but him especially, are the reason that power play is working at all. I said it to start the year. He's there with a few guys who, on most teams, are not power play guys. Mm-hmm. And yet he's helping them become that because he's able to juke the guy at the blue line to create a 5-on-3 for a split second, long enough to get the puck to somebody else who's open for a one-timer, for a give and go, something like that.
And that's every game.
Every single game. Every game. Not only every game, every power play. Every power play opportunity, because he's also the one entering the zone, and he's pretty damn good at that. Yeah. So he enters the zone himself, sometimes with help, but mostly himself. Once he's gained the zone, finds a player or a deke or a shot to take that's going to create a chance. Like, man, oh man, Lane Hutson. Man, oh man. He's still searching really hard for his first goal. He's on the cusp, Jordan. He's taking shots. Yeah. He's getting close. But the 11 assists are an incredibly positive thing for Laine Hutson here. He's definitely still in the Calder race among the top 4 or 5 guys, probably. We could list them off, but we've done it before, so who cares? But Laine Hutson, incredible start to the year, man.
The elusive first NHL goal. He only has 19 shots on goal. I was looking at through percentage, so the number of shot attempts you take that actually hit the net, because I know people very much complain about Mike Matheson and how he always has his shots blocked. Laine Hutson actually has a lower through percentage than Mike Matheson does. Matheson's around 34-35%. Laine Hutson's, I think, under 30%.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So less than 30% of his shot attempts actually get to the net.
That's surprising.
So, I mean, but also just to be clear, like defensemen in general, like if you're clipping over 40, it's
not bad. Yeah.
Honestly, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
If you get to 45 or 50, it's actually amazing for a defenseman. There's just so much more distance they have to cover before it gets blocked. That's something to look into. He only has 19 shots in 20 games. I'm not worried about it. He finishes the year with 5 or 6 goals. It'll be fine.
Yeah, that's great. I'm more or less just excited to celebrate his first.
We'll get there.
That's more what it is.
Yeah.
It's coming.
All right, so let's wrap up the 3 stars, Brian, with your third and final star.
This one is the tough one for me, but I think I'm pretty confident in who I'm going with in terms of expectations versus results. It has to be Jake Evans.
Okay.
It has to be Jake Evans.
This is the most Brian 3 stars, I think, ever.
Yeah, right?
Where you have Brendan Gallagher as a first star and Jake Evans as a third star.
And a rookie defenseman.
And a rookie defenseman as second star. This is amazing. Yeah, go into... So I will say, when we were initially talking about the 5 players, we've talked about all 5 of them. Because I didn't have Hutson or Evans, but those were obviously the other 2 guys.
Yeah.
I was very strongly considering. I'm happy you gave them the light. Why is Evans your third star?
Evans has done exactly what he's done his whole career, but on another level. We know he's very, very good defensively. He's sort of top tier in the NHL in terms of defensive guys who don't get a lot of ice time. He's not a Mark Stone, who's also putting up crazy points, but when you just talk the defense and who he gets matched up against consistently, I talked about his matchup against McDavid pretty often in that game, and he played very, very well against him. Draisaitl playing on that line too, so like Evans had to be really good, incredibly perceptive because of how quickly they create opportunities. And he was getting into passing lanes, he was blocking shots, and he's also been great at transitioning from defense to the neutral zone. He's not necessarily the guy who's always going to be bringing the puck into the offensive zone. That's sort of a different caliber or a different style of player, but he's usually paired with somebody who can do that. But at the very least, in terms of stopping the opportunity for the opposition and then getting the puck out of the defensive zone, that's sort of been Evans' calling card his whole career. Mm-hmm. And then add to that these flashes of offense when they do actually gain the zone, depending on who he's playing with. And then add to that, again, the fact that the Habs are just clamoring for a second-line center, and so he's filled that role. Is he a second-line center long-term? No, of course he's not. But as a sort of stopgap for the time being, give him more ice time guy, has he been the most deserving of that spot? Unquestionably. Yeah. Unquestionably. So I don't have much more to go on in terms of Jake Evans. I just have been thrilled with his performance so far this year. It is a contract year, so maybe that should be added to the discussion here, where he's playing for his NHL career. Not that it's ever been in doubt that he would be in the show next year, because he deserves to be there. I think a good 20-25 teams would love to have his services as a defensive center who can match up against good opposition. But you and I have sort of, I guess, transitioned from, if he's on the team, great. If he's not, whatever, we'll see, to a point where now I'm like, I really hope they re-sign him. I really do hope that they re-sign him and he stays on as a defensive center lower in the lineup. And maybe Owen Beck can learn from him, and Hage, when he comes up, can learn from him, and all these really young centers. I mean, Doc and Newhook are currently learning from him as well.
Right.
All these guys can learn from him from a defensive standard standpoint, and how attuned, how locked on you have to be night in, night out if you want to be a consistent defensive center in this league.
Yep. I ultimately, even a third line center, I think is kind of pushing it for him. Ultimately, I think he does top out as a 30-point guy, maybe 35. He's playing with Cole Caulfield, I'm presuming these lines are going to go back to what they were. St. Louis line jumbling usually is just within the game and doesn't usually carry over. He's playing with Cole Caulfield, and the offense is still not always there. Caulfield's become the play driver.
Yeah,
to that line, which shouldn't be a surprise. But he has been great this year. He answers the bell every single year when he inevitably has to move up the lineup. He always starts the year as your fourth line center, In each of the past 4 seasons, at times, he has been number 3, and he has also at times been number 2. This is the highest profile number 2 center he's ever been, and he's taking that opportunity. He's been great so far this year. And his presence on the team long term, who knows? But we're going to probably get into that in the very next segment. So let's get into it. So yeah, my honorable mentions were Hudson and Jake Evans. The faintest of mentions, the Caden Gooley, would be the 6th guy that briefly entered the chat towards the end there.
Yes, exactly. And part of that is him finally being put on his proper side. Can you tell the listeners the stat you told me that absolutely blew my mind?
Yeah, so this is per Arpin Basu. The last time Caden Gooley played on the left side of the fence before, about a week ago, was in mid-January. So he went essentially 10 months playing on the right.
My goodness.
We're going to get into Caden Gooley. We have some stuff on him in part 2. So let's hold on to the Gooley chat, but
Sounds
just wanted to mention it quickly. Okay, 3 burning questions for the next 20 games of the season. The number 1 burning question, it has to be, because he's now practicing, how does Patrick Laine affect the forward group? Look, he's still going to have missed 25, 30 games, but as you mentioned to me, we thought his career might be over.
Yeah, when we saw that,
we had an episode that we were basically crying in an entire episode. And the fact that he has been able to just come back, stick to the plan, be very focused, and the knee injury wasn't as bad as we thought it would be, and it's going to end up being 2.5 months, maybe, fingers crossed. And he misses a third of the season. Who cares? He's playing hockey.
Yeah.
So we see him in the practice videos that come out right now with him there, and it's like, we're getting close.
And knee pain or not, he's lasering those pucks into the top shelf.
Yeah. I mean, worst case, if he has limited mobility, you just stick him on the half wall on the power play, and he's scoring 20 goals in the season. Yeah. So what's going on? So I think also to this point, Raphael Harvey Pinard's coming back.
Yep.
We got some movement going on. Now, the Habs do have an extra roster space right now. Lucas Condadas played really well as a call-up.
Yep.
Pizzetta's been scratched basically the whole season. So they do have 13 forwards already. What's going to happen? What are we doing with Kirby Dach? What's Christian Dvorak going to do? Alex Newhook, any concerns? Patrick Laine coming back is awesome. How does it affect everything downstream? I guess maybe the question I should start off with within this. Who is he playing with?
Great question. I have less than no idea. I'll be honest with you. I have less than no idea who he's going to play with. He might play with Dvorak and Anderson for all I know. That's how much the lines have been.
That would suck.
That would absolutely suck. He won't. I don't think Marty would do that to him after this hardship, the injury and everything, and his fight to return way earlier than we all thought. So if I could have it my way, he's absolutely in the top 6. And I know we basically just said that Evans has deserved to be the second line center based on his effort and his abilities and what he's shown so far the most. But I'm praying that in the next 5-10 games before he comes back, or 15, whatever it is, that Kirby Dach and or Alex Newhook figure it out. Because one of the biggest things that occurs when Laine comes back into the lineup is you now have the potential to create an actual top 6. Right now, we've got a top 2 of Suzuki and Caulfield. Dach and Slav have been disappointing, especially lately. And Newhook has cemented himself. I think you said it recently that he's really a third line winger, maybe center, but probably third line winger.
Yeah.
And so to go from the start of the season or the preseason where we're thinking we have a real top 6 now, at least 5 guys, to, we actually only have these 2 guys who are now separated from each other in Suzuki and Caulfield. Does Laine coming back fix all this? That's what I want to know. I don't think it does. I think that these other guys around him, not Suzuki, not Caulfield, they've already figured it out. But these other guys around him have to figure it out in order for his transition back into the top 6 or into the top 6 for the first time as a Canadian will work.
Is there a universe where it could be Suzuki with Slavkovsky and Laine?
Is there a universe? Yeah, no question.
That does mean that Dach has to. I don't know how Dach doesn't go back to center in the next 2 weeks. That's the underlying theme here of whatever we're putting together on our whiteboards of the Habs 12 forwards. You almost have to have Dach at center, because if not, Evans isn't be centering Dach and Caulfield? Can we even do that?
And then Laine, Slavkovsky, Suzuki. Look, if you're talking merit in terms of who it deserves, we've said it, it's Evans. He merits to be the center. But is he the long-term solution to 2C? Of course not. Of course not. So Laine's return really, to me, it's going to show us who's real and who's fake in that top 6, I think. Because Laine is as real as it gets, assuming he's healthy and assuming that He's worked out all of the issues that he had when he went into the player assistance program, which, based on his positivity through this injury and everything, holy crow, he's been so positive. Anytime that you see him near the team, with the team at practice, like, he looks so thrilled to be back at practice. Like, he's had a positive energy around him this entire time. The fan base has been huge in that. Like, our excitement for him coming to the team, and then our sort of support as a whole of him in his recovery and soon return, I think have been helpful for that. So assuming all those things are good, which they seem to be, he's a cemented player in this top six who, like, the onus is not on him. I think the onus is on Slavkovsky to figure it out. And it's on Doc to figure it out.
Can I pitch then? Because I agree, and that's where I was leading to, and you've kind of picked it up. You want to make sure Laine is able to get off to a good start, and that it goes to what I've been talking about 20 minutes ago. Suzuki's the guy. You got to put him with Suzuki.
Right.
Everyone plays well with Nick. That's like, again, if you're going to, the best you can insulate a guy who's going to play 18 minutes a night, put him with Nick.
Yeah.
So if you have Suzuki with Laine and Slav, can my second line then be Kirby Doc with Cole Caulfield and Emil Heineman?
I love that.
Because
yeah,
it's part of our next question, but I'm okay to like bring it up now in the discussion. Like, who's had a better season from a meritocratic standpoint to earn that last top six spot? Emil Heineman or Alex Newhook?
Yeah, it's probably been Heineman, given a lesser role, but performed higher in
but you see him so much more.
Yeah.
And now he is incredibly physical. He is understood. We've talked about this all season with guys in the bottom six. Understand your role.
Yeah.
Understand your assignment. Anderson, like, salute to him. Honestly, the fact that we're not mentioning Josh Anderson at all is honestly like a great thing for him.
In terms of like a top six spot.
In terms of top six, just in terms of like our thoughts about the first 20 games of the season, and Anderson is not being brought up. He is under the radar, doing his job, has whatever he has as 4 goals and 5 assists, or he's been great. He's been fine. He's been taken away from the power play. They're saying focus on some penalty kill, focus on being a bottom six guy.
Great.
He's doing it. Heineman, I think, has earned it more than Newhook. So that's what I think I would do, but who knows? Anything else on, like, I know that's a lot. There's a lot of like moving parts here. Any other thoughts on that before we transition? Maybe quickly on how we deal with Harvey Pinard.
Sure. Well, I want to close out this discussion because everything we've talked about is the lines at 5-on-5, but this also affects the power play when Laine comes back.
Well, it's Doc. Doc gets swapped out for Laine. It has to be.
Doc gets swapped out for Laine, and it also provides the organic opportunity for the thing that we all want to happen to finally happen, because you can spread the wealth a little bit better now. So if Matheson ends up switching with Hudson, Matheson at least is surrounded by a little bit more firepower because Laine is returning. And it won't be Laine necessarily, but if Doc goes there or something else, maybe I'm grasping at straws because it's all I've wanted to see all year. But anywho, so that definitely extends to the power play. And then there's also the question of who gets sent down. And I mean, Condotta deserves to be here a heck of a lot more than Dvorak does. So if it's a centerman because you're moving Doc back to center, which should be the goal if you're Martin St. Louis, there's no doubt in my mind that it should be Christian Dvorak being waived and sent down.
Yeah, so the question is, do you want to carry 14 forwards or not? Because you can technically only send down Pizzetta and bring Harvey Pinard and Laine back in, but then you got 2 scratches at forward. Habs have basically only been carrying 22 guys all season, so only 2 healthy scratches. I'm presuming on like long road trips, they're going to call up an extra body just to have 3 spares. But Eastern Conference, Laval and the Habs are 20 minutes from each other by metro.
Yeah.
They've been okay with just 2 spares. So Pizzetta would certainly be a guy getting sent down. And then like, you have to ask the question, like, are you even worried at all about Harvey Pinard clearing waivers? Does it matter anymore? How much of a chance does he get? I know he's doing his conditioning right now, but how much of a chance does he get?
I think that depends on what they believe his ceiling is. And for me, it's a third line subsidiary scorer. It's nothing more than that. His ceiling is not a top 6 guy, right? Like, I'm not crazy to
I thought there was an opportunity, I thought, based on his like early in his career and towards the end of the queue and what he was doing in Laval. Like, I thought there was an opportunity there to do like a Brendan Gallagher light thing.
Yeah.
Right. But the injuries have destroyed him for the last 18 months. It's not over for him, but his time in Montreal, I think, is numbered. And like, if we're doing the top 6 the way we just said, Evans and Gallagher and Anderson go back together as just a lovely third line.
Right.
And then Condotta, 100%. He's earned
he's got
the
to
4C.
stick around. Yeah.
Okay, so now we got 2 spots left.
Armia.
Earned it.
Yep.
at this point. He's him and Heineman, like they got the chance with Suzuki.
Yeah.
Armia's, again, they've tried Armia in the top 6. It doesn't work out. He needs to be a bottom 6 guy.
Yeah, of course.
And he's good there. He's good on the second wave of the power play.
Yeah.
We got one spot left now, and it's Dvorak and it's Harvey Bernard.
I mean, that's not even a question. It's Harvey Pinard over Dvorak. No, like I haven't even seen him play yet because he's been hurt. So
yeah,
you know.
I guess I'm also haven't mentioned Alex Newhook yet.
Haven't you? Oh no. Uh-oh.
He is not part of my top 6.
Whoa.
He's not in that third line. So you see the issue here.
Yeah. And this is prior to Hage and Demidov and these other forwards coming in next year. Beck, who looks great.
Oh, so Beck's going to be on the Habs next year.
Yeah. So this, in terms of a spot for Rafael, sad to say, but the injuries really hurt him in terms of like, because this was the time where he had to show I deserve to be here, move off of somebody else. But the window is rapidly closing here.
It is. If I can give what I think that is actually going to happen, they're going to send down Kandata before he becomes waiver eligible again.
Yeah, because someone else would scoop him up.
Because it's 10 games or 30 days. I'm a little confused because they called him up twice, but I'm pretty sure the second call up, I don't know when the clock restarts.
Okay.
I presume they would do that, bring Harvey Pinard up. That deals with one issue, and then it's Pizzetta's out, and Laine will be in, at least from a roster standpoint, and then someone's getting the scratch.
Yeah.
But then you have at least a little bit of firepower if you're St. Louis. If you don't like what Newhook did one game, if you don't like I can't imagine they're going to bench Slav or Doc, but they can still move things around to the point where, anyways, that could be what happens.
Right.
It'll be interesting to watch over the next 20 games. 2 more questions before we get out of here. With the first 20 games behind us, Brian, who has changed your opinion of them the most? Now, this can be for the better, for the worst. For the better, I mean, it's Lane Hutson's the answer, like, obviously. But we've already talked about Lane.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind, we'll move off of that, because Hudson has gone from a guy that I thought was, might be all right, to like, he actually might be the best Habs defender in 3 years. Some might argue he's already that. So let's put that aside. We can bring up prospects if we want.
Okay.
Does anyone come to mind for you right away for the better, on the positive end?
For the better, we've talked about him already, Gallagher.
Yeah.
Returning to old school Gallagher. So that maybe that's less of a changing our opinion of him, or more like a return to form.
Yeah.
But Anderson.
Yeah, that's a great pick.
We glanced at it. But Josh Anderson, understanding his role in the bottom 6, becoming and I'm going to check because I checked it last night prior to the stats going up in terms of hits. He's absolutely still leading the team in hits. 50 hits so far this year. So that's about 2.5. That's exactly 2.5 per game. Emil Heineman is right behind him, right on his tail with 46, tied with Slavkovsky.
So that's
another
guy.
reason. Yeah.
That's my guy.
Very nice.
In terms of, like, again, Hudson aside.
Yeah.
Me, it's Emil Heineman, where it's like, okay, you're definitely an NHLer. That's pretty straightforward. You're been really good as a fourth liner. You're getting 10 minutes a game. You've scored 4 goals. You're on power play 2. You're hitting everything that moves. When there's a forecheck, and if I'm not watching close enough and I just hear someone getting rammed up against the boards, I know it's Heineman on the forecheck.
Yeah.
So in terms of expectation change, I don't know what my expectations were for Heineman really coming into the year.
I remember what they were.
What were they?
Not necessarily for you, but I think for us in general, it was borderline guy. It was like the clock is ticking. I think that's the way we worded it at the end of last season. The clock is ticking with Heineman. We haven't seen enough yet.
Yeah, it was the Jesse Ullinen position of like, it's it, TikTok, like, let's go.
Yeah, it's time.
He's answered the bell.
Yeah,
and I think he's deserving of a bit more time. He's getting 10 minutes a night. I've checked. It hasn't really changed much over the last, I was like, maybe it's slowly going up, and that's just, maybe it's the first 10 games, but second 10 games, but I think there should be some opportunities going forward for him to 12, 13 minutes, or just a little bit, an extra shift here or there. Because I've really liked what I've seen, like the shots there.
Oh yeah, laser.
He has a 25 goal shot.
Yeah.
He has the effort, right? So it's like, how much of the game can he round out so that he's actually playing 16 minutes a night, not 10, so he can score more goals. So that would be my non-Hudson pick, would be Emil Heineman. But I really like Josh Anderson as well. It's interesting. It's the bottom 6 guys playing
their role.
Yeah. And the bottom 6 has been fine. We've said that before. The bottom 6, we've actually quite liked it. Whether Evans has been part of the bottom 6 or now Kandata has been part of that bottom 6, Gallagher and Anderson have been there all season, and they've been like, we know they have bloated contracts, but at least they're putting in work. It's not like for 2 guys making $12 million combined, Gallagher's putting up numbers, but you would hope that they have a bigger role in the team, but At least they are succeeding in the role that they have.
Yeah. Well, I think last season I said that we could have the most expensive, but also one of the most effective 3rd/4th lines in hockey.
Yep.
13.7 million, I think, including Jake Evans.
Mm-hmm.
And those three guys just straight up work with each other. I hope they go back to it eventually, but we shall see. I think Gallagher's playing well regardless. It's not going to affect him. Anderson's giving his all regardless, and Evans doing great regardless. So I think those three guys, it's more like, I mean, actually, here's what it is, Jordan. You talked about Suzuki in the top six as being like, put anyone with Suzuki, it'll work. In the bottom six, it's sort of those three guys that like they provide that energy and that leadership and the, I don't know if framework is the right word, but like where other players get to watch them and what they do on the forecheck, watch what they do defensively and go, okay, that's what I should be doing. That's really the metric here.
Yeah.
So using those guys as the metric in the bottom six, I think is a really positive thing. And then, yeah, some onus on the guys who are not bringing it would be lovely. So should we get into the negatives?
Let's do
now?
that. So with these first 20 games behind us, which player has changed your opinion of them the most? And now let's go like for the worst. What do you have?
I got to go Caden Primo.
Yep, he's on the list.
I got to go Caden Primo because my expectation based on last season was that with more starts, he'll be close to as good. I didn't think he would be as good because last season he had a really good season last year. Good numbers, lots of quality starts, and fairly consistent. I don't want to say perfectly consistent because he wasn't. No goalie really is. But
can part of that be? Sorry to cut you off, but
no, it's okay.
Can part of that be because last year he knew that he was like they were holding him up so that he wouldn't go through waivers. So there was almost like an additional protective layer around his performances. Now, I know he was also playing like every 14 days.
Yeah.
At the beginning, he played more and more later on. But maybe there was a bit of like
knowing he had a safety net.
Was a safety helpful? Net. There was also like a bit of a vote of confidence in there of like, no, like this is your big year. You know, we believe in you. We need you to be on this team.
Right.
We're not going to send you through waivers. You're too valuable for that. And now like that shine has worn off, and he's kind of gone almost back to the mildly disappointing guy he was at times in Laval.
I mean, mildly disappointing. I joked when we were watching the Vegas game because we didn't even really notice that they had switched goalies. That's how kind of tuned out we were after it was 5-0. So going into the third, and they had switched Monty out for Primo. And I joked, oh yeah, that's who you want going into a blowout, is a guy who's sitting at like an 840 save percentage. So mildly disappointing, a little worse than that, I would say, in the case of Caden Primo. This was a season where he had to take a step, especially early, and there's a lot of really heavy, powerful footsteps behind him when you talk about Volikin and especially Fowler, and now Dobish.
Dobish might take the spot next year.
Next year, I mean, is there a possibility for a switch? Nobody's claiming Primo now if he goes on waivers.
I've heard that. My retort to it is always, does it matter? Does it really matter in the grand scheme of things?
If he gets claimed, you mean?
Yeah, because if you're sending him down, you're basically telling Primo you're done with us. Does it matter if they call up? Like, what does it really change to call up Jakob Dobish to see?
What it changes is his development goes from a league where he's a little better than he should be. Like he's not too good for the AHL, but he's definitely one of the best goalies there right now, to a moderately okay backup playing much less time in the NHL behind a defense who is Swiss cheese at times and who against good teams will get lit up. Remember what happened to Primo when he was playing for a rebuilding Montreal Canadiens team with little to no defensive acumen? He got shell-shocked night after night. And did that mess up his development? I think probably. Being brought up very young and being shell-shocked and blasted with shots over and over and over again and letting in 5, 6, 7 a night. Like if that were to happen to Dobish, does that shatter his confidence? I would hope not. But I just think you leave him in a positive environment. The same way that we've needed to call up Joshua Roy for about 3-4 weeks now, and they haven't done it because they're leaving him in a positive environment. And I think in the case of Dobish, that's probably what they're doing now. I
think you probably want to get a bigger sample of Primo before you make the final call. He's RFA at the end of the year, so.
Well, the same way that Montembeault went from, unbelievable start in his first game to, rough waters here, to, okay, he's back. And now this past game was not good. So, goalies go through waves, especially behind porous defense, like I said. So you're right to say that we need a bigger sample size from Caden Primo. We need to see more because, look, he might start 3 more games and have 3 quality starts, win 2 of those, and confidence is back, and he might play well for the rest of the season. That's a real possibility here.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we've known for many years now that Primo topped out as a decent backup. And, it is what it is. Dobish, Fowler, Volokin, they're all going to surpass him in the next 18 months. So I would just ride it out at this point, unless you think there's a legitimate reason not to. Just to keep going here, I had Kirby Dach on my list. We talked about him a bit. I did want to bring up, he leads the team at expected goals at 5-on-5 with 4.48. He only has the 1. So indication there that he's struggling with finishing. Yeah. Which leads to confidence. Like one can lead to the other. Yeah. That he's just not able to. I mean, Slav's the same way. Like he should not be on this. Slav has been disappointing. It's not changing my outlook on him, which is what this question is, right? So Dach, I wanted to bring that number up. I keep saying this. I really thought there was a universe where he was the number 1 center at one point. I'm not ready to give up on it. He's getting the whole year from me.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's an ACL injury. He missed the whole year. Didn't play for 18 months. Baby steps, but like understanding that it's been 20 games now. You brought up Primo. I'm bringing up Alex Newhook again. Yeah, I need to see a little bit more, but I'm starting to I don't know. And Sean Farrell. Okay. A little bit lower down the list. Yeah. Him too needs a contract at the end of the year. I'm becoming less and less convinced that he's going to get one from the Montreal Canadiens.
He also is hearing footsteps.
Much louder ones.
Yeah, unbelievably loud ones. So all the way across the ocean.
Well, we'll see. Anyways, let's move on from that one. Let's get into our last question. But so overall, there's some guys that we're really starting to put bookmarks on okay, I think real things are happening now with their player career trajectory. Last question. Looking forward to the next 20 games. What's the one thing you want to learn more about the team over these next 20 games? Now I'm going to add a caveat. You can't answer Patrick Laine because we already talked about him. Of course. So Laine aside.
Well, I don't want to learn about him. I'm excited about him.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see how he morphs the team, but we already talked about that. Anyway, because the answer is Patrick Laine.
Well, for once, Jordan, in a question where I'm only supposed to provide one answer, I only have one answer. So I'm going to give it to you. Yeah. The second center. I've talked about it a bit already. Right. I want to know who the actual second center of this effing team is. Yeah. And you're right to say that Dach has a long leash because both Dach and Slavkovsky were on my list for disappointment, and I scratched them out because I was like, Slavkovsky's 20. Yeah. This is just a lull in his this is just a down point, and 100%. he's gonna roar back. I'm not worried about Slav at all. Dach, the injury, if you're out for a year, I think it's only fair to give for any time a guy is injured, how much time till after there's that thing with breakups. If you're with somebody for 3 years, you give it 3 months until you're kind of over it and ready to move on. Sure. If you're with someone for 10 years, it's more like 10 months a year. There should almost be a corollary to injuries where you're out for a year. How long do we give you before the expectations start ramping up again? I think 3 months at the very least is a reasonable estimate for that. We're getting kind of close to there. We're at the 2-month-ish mark of the season now, 2 months, 2.5. So pretty soon it's going to start to matter, and we're going to start to see a lot more pressure on Dach, and that pressure is going to come in a big way when Laine comes to the lineup and needs an offensive center to play with. And the more I think about it, the more I want to see Suzuki back with Caulfield. So we talked about the top 6 getting jumbled around, and maybe Dach, Caulfield, and Heineman as the second. I really want Suzuki and Caulfield back together, as I always do, maybe with Slav again, and then Dach can maybe find his game with Laine, because Dach at his purest is a playmaker.
Because that's the question. Does Laine need Dach to find his own game? It's hard to phrase this. Does Patrick Laine need someone like Kirby Dach to help Patrick Laine get back into it? Or does Kirby Dach need someone as skilled as Patrick Laine so that he can get back into it? And is that just a recipe for disaster if you have one guy who's super rusty, coming off an injury, and another guy who has also come off an injury but now has played 20 games and has still not found his confidence?
I think it's a risk that, because if it works out, brilliance. If it works out,
Jack Adams, we're done.
Yeah, exactly. Jack Adams. You've won 24 games this year. Jack Adams. Congratulations. But look, that could be the answer for both of them. That could help them both figure it out.
I'm sure they'll be together at some point with Dach. Dach has to go back to center. Yeah, that's great. Second line center is actually a really great answer. My answer, I think, unsurprisingly here, is are we finally going to see Caden Gooley become Caden Gooley?
Yes.
Are we finally at the point where it's okay, 22 minutes a night, first pair, left-handed defenseman Caden Gooley? Are we finally seeing it? Now, I feel like we've been waiting to ask this question, sometimes patiently, sometimes impatiently, for the past 2 years. Of he's going to be the guy, right?
Yeah.
And this divergence that the Canadiens have been on with Gooley, or this side quest, whatever we want to call it,
Literally a side quest because he's on the wrong side.
Because he's been on the right side for 10 months. And it just, we keep looking at each other being like, do they not believe in this guy to be the number one defenseman of the future? I know Hudson's there and I know Ryan Bacher's around, but like it's Caden Gooley's the guy right now.
Of course.
Are we going to do it? And him finally moving back to the left side now for 3 games, like very excited. Like you saw him immediately against the Edmonton Oilers and he was like, oh yeah, he actually can be. Now he does always get up for the Edmonton games.
Yes.
Because he played there in junior a bit. So there's a little something there. He's also an Alberta boy.
And I think he loves defending against the top guys in the league too.
He does. So like
those games.
There's a little asterisk there because he always plays well against the Oilers, but he showed up and you're like, oh wow.
Yeah.
And this has been interesting because I think people have been observing things differently about how Gooley is playing and how not the other guy, but let's keep it on Gooley for a second. So the idea with Gooley is because now he's on his more natural side, he might be able to be more aggressive because you're not backhanding the puck to keep it in the zone anymore.
Yeah.
Right. So I think naturally he's going to be more capable of jumping into the play.
He'll have that extra split second to make a decision.
And you're seeing it immediately.
Yeah.
That he has that extra split second now to more naturally respond offensively. And that's, you're noticing it right away and it's great. What I've also noticed is the guy who's flipped to the other side, Mike Matheson, is now forced to be a little bit more patient.
Right.
He's forced to change his gap control just a little bit more. Yeah. And he's a better defenseman because of it. Again, on Monday night, all of a sudden you're looking at Matheson, you're like, oh, he's not being as stupid in the offensive zone anymore. Because he knows now he needs that extra half a second.
Yes.
Look, he skates like the wind, Mike Matheson. So, yes, he does have to like figure out forehand, backhand, but now he's like, he knows like, oh, I'm on my offside. I need to give the extra time. By the way, this is the extra time he should have been giving already that he just wasn't doing on the left side. But now so I've actually seen Matheson. It was interesting to see like Matheson's actually going to be better on the right side because he's forcing himself. Like his internal programming is like, oh, I got to be a bit more patient now. I got to be a bit more reserved now.
Right.
I like Matheson at 5-on-5 is not someone that I was like, oh no, we're not going to get his offensive production. I don't care about that. He's going to be a workhorse. He's on the power play. Like he's still going to put up points, but him being a bit more secure defensively is actually a nice add-on to it. But it's allowing Caden Gooley, because we've seen the moments of Gooley start to tap into his offensive side. And when he went to the right side, he just couldn't do that consistently because he was so concerned about the defense.
Yeah.
So Gooley is my answer. Like, can we see in these next 20 games, Gooley stick on the left side, play the best guys in the league, and are we going to see more consistent offense out of him? So that's what I'm most excited to see.
That's a really, really good answer, Jordan. And I do have to wonder on that vein of Matheson going to the right side and improving. That's a really good point, by the way. It's something that I hadn't really noticed, but as you pointed out, like, wow, very cool that he's having to take that extra split second, but that's making him a better defenseman. I wonder if that was the design with putting Gooley on the right for so long, is to limit his ability to react in a split second, or not limit it, but make that the objective, is that he has to react so quickly because he has so little time. And then when he goes to the left, it's almost like a different game for him now, where he's like, I've played here all my life, so I'm more comfortable on the left, but B, you have this more time when the puck comes off the boards. You're more able to control in terms of poke checking as well. Like when, as a lefty, when you have the stick in one hand because you're trying to get more reach on your poke check, and that stick is on the boards side instead of the middle of the ice, that just allows for people to cut to the center much more easily. So now that he's on the left, it must feel like the weights have come off. Like I've used this analogy before, like Goku's weights coming off. I think that's the second Dragon Ball Z reference I've made. I called the hyperbolic time chamber earlier. It's too many Dragon Ball Z references, Brian. That show's been over forever and nobody knows it anymore. But it's like the weight's coming off. So I wonder if that was almost by design. Go there for 10 months, have a rough time. When you come back to the left, it's going to feel amazing. You're going to be awesome there. So as much as we lamented about it, did it do some good for him in the long term? I'm curious about that question. And we'll never know, because maybe he would have gone to the left side and just been naturally great automatically.
I think it's, again, in the same way I would say, like, Primo Dobesh, like, who cares? The grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter. Caden Gooley spending, what did it amount to? 40, 50 games on the right? Don't think it matters. Like, he got to spend more time playing against top forward lines.
Much more ice time.
That probably was worth it. I would have argued that we could have ended it at the end of last season and starting this season. Put him back on the left, but he got an extra 15 games or so on the right. Does it help? Maybe. Maybe it gives them a better perspective of that side of the ice, especially in a universe where it's Lane Hudson in the future.
Yeah.
And Hudson's on the right, and Cooley's going to understand, okay, I know how hard it is to be on that side. That could be it. Maybe that's part of the calculus. Maybe it's not. I think it's ultimately like we just need our best defenseman to be on the top pairing.
Yeah.
And they're both lefties right now, so let's throw Cooley there so that Matheson can activate offense more. And maybe they're at the point now where they're saying, that's fine. Let's get Cooley back on the left side. Let's see how that looks different. And I think it's been, for the most part, a lot better.
Yeah, well said.
So anything else, Brian, as we close out the episode, looking forward 20 more games into a Habs season that has been, I think, tumultuous, not controversial, other than the Jack Eye stuff in the preseason, like it's been a lot of just like hockey only problems, which is
kind of nice.
That's
actually.
all right.
Yeah.
Slowly trending upwards, but largely still a basket case. Any thoughts on the season so far and what we're about to jump into in the next 20 games?
Well, the next 20 games are tough. We had an easy first 20 games of the season, Jordan. In the grand scheme of things, like the difficulty of schedule was not that tough to start the season. We played a lot of teams we should have beaten that we didn't. The next 20 are not like that. We go on a colossally difficult road trip right at the end of the next 20 games.
Yep.
And so that's going to be an adventure. Prior to that, we play a bunch of heavy hitters. So this is, I think, the measuring stick portion of the season where we're going to be comparing ourselves to really playoff teams.
Yeah.
We're getting to a point where now you play Colorado and the Rangers and Boston, and Boston's in a bit of a tailspin and biting themselves and shooting themselves in the foot. So
I would say, like, honestly, like I think Sweeney and Neely have done a hell of a job in Boston. And maybe some lifetime contract extensions are due at this point.
I would love that. I think that's a great idea.
Same goes for Shanahan.
Yeah, exactly.
Bring Pierre Dorion back to the Sens.
Yeah.
Although they seem to be doing fine without him.
The trifecta of bad management. But back to the Canadiens, yeah, it's going to be a rough 20 games, but that it's also an opportunity for this team to get back to the way that they were playing in some games at the end of last season and how they played against Edmonton. If they can find the gusto to perform like that against good teams in the next 20 games, this will be a colossally important step in the rebuild in terms of the players that are already here, in terms of getting Suzuki, Slavkovsky, Caulfield, Doc, all the guys who we deem top six guys. If they can play well in the top six against these good teams, that's a huge step in the right direction. Cooley on the left-hand side as well. And the goalies also figuring it out. That's going to be a huge part of these next 20 games is the goalies coming back to the mean, hopefully, in terms of the way that they're playing.
So, yeah, next 20 games. I think the next 10 to 12, it's all right. There's a Winnipeg game and there's a Rangers game. Beyond that, honestly, this is where you go on your winning streak. Once you get to that road trip, towards the end of December, which is about like game 35-ish, we've talked about it. It's like 1 month of absolute terror in the Chicago game.
Yeah.
Like it's brutal, which is like the 35 to 40 game mark, and then it'll continue to like game 50 or whatever. So there's a bit of a light period, although they have to go to Winnipeg, which God bless.
Good luck. Yeah.
But yeah, then after that, like by game 34, 35, it goes up not one level, but like 4 levels.
Yeah.
And we'll see. Maybe that's like, it's good that they have the easier schedule before that to like get Laine back in, hopefully, and like kind of figure things out, get some chemistry before the brutal stretch starts, because that's going to be rough. But for now, we'll wrap up the episode there. That'll do it for this week's episode of This Week in Habsland. We'll be back next Monday to keep talking about the Montreal Canadiens. You can find us on social media at Blue Sky and TikTok at Habsland Pod. And if you like what you heard, feel free to leave a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Until next Monday, go Habs.